Hello and welcome to another of the Building Safety Group's podcasts. My name's Chris Chapman and today we'll be talking about legislation. Before we go into that, a little bit about us. We were established in 1965 and we operate throughout mainland UK. We're a not-for-profit organisation owned by our members for the benefit of our members, and we're recognised by the HSE. We're the largest construction safety group in the UK, and we have over 800 member companies located throughout mainland UK. We carry out over 18,000 site inspections every year, and we look after 23,000 operatives. We also inspect 3,700 workplaces apart from construction sites, and over 10,000 people attend our training courses every year. We carry the accreditations Investors in People, ISO 9001 Quality, 14001 Environment, and OSAS 18001 Occupational Safety and Health. We're a member of the Chartered Building Consultancy, a member of ROSPA, and we're accredited to carry out the training courses for the CITB, including the Site Manager's Safety Training Scheme and the Site Supervisor's Safety Training Scheme. We also deliver the NEBOSH National Construction Certificate training at our base in North Bristol. It shows the coverage out of our membership, right from up in the north in Aberdeen right down to the tip of Cornwall, and the red dots show our location of our training centres. So that's us, but what we're here to talk about today is legislation, and there's a misconception in the UK that we're completely burdened by far too much legislation, and it's often labelled red tape or bureaucracy. So in 2011, Professor Ragnar Lofsted produced a report on an independent review of the health and safety legislation, which had been commissioned by the Department of Work and Pensions, called Reclaiming Health and Safety for All. And in his foreword to this report, he stated, "During the past 6 months, I sought the views from a wide range of organisations and have studied the available scientific literature to consider whether, on the basis of risk and evidence, health and safety regulations are appropriate or have gone too far. I have concluded that in general there is no case for radically altering health and safety legislation. Regulations place responsibilities primarily on those who create the risks, recognising that they are best placed to decide how to control them and allowing them to do so in an appropriate manner. There is a view across the board that the existing regulatory requirements are broadly right and that regulation has a role to play in preventing injury and ill health in the workplace. Indeed, there is evidence to suggest that proportionate risk management can make good business sense. And this is something we've always agreed with, that BSG, we want a gold standard service there, not gold platings. It must be proportionate risk management, and it's the key. In a separate review conducted earlier by the HSC, the Health and Safety Commission, it found that people were confused about the differences between an Act of Parliament, a regulation, an approved code of practice, health and safety guidance, industry guidance, and how they relate to each other. So today's podcast aims to explain how these work and how each fits to each other. So the Health and Safety at Work Act, which is where we start, been around since 1974, and the general duties in the management regulations, which we'll look at a little bit later, are both goal setting and leave employers freedom to decide how to control the risks that they identify. The guidance and approved codes of practice give advice that some risks are so great or the proper control measures so costly that it would not be appropriate to leave employers discretion in deciding what to do about them. Regulations identify these risks and set out specific actions that must be taken. And often these requirements are absolute to do something without qualification of whether it is reasonably practicable. So, start, as I say, with the Health and Safety at Work Act. It's a basis of British health and safety law, and it's been around, as I say, quite some time now. The Act sets out the general duties which employers have towards employees and members of the public, and the employees have to themselves and to each other. And these duties are qualified in the Act by the principle, so far as is reasonably practicable. In other words, an employer does not have to take measures to avoid or reduce the risk if they are technically impossible or if time, travel and cost of the measures would be grossly disproportionate to the risk. The main part of the Act, part one, is the introduction. We need to concern ourselves with that really. Part two, probably the main part, general duties of employers to their employees, general duties of employers and self-employed to persons other than their employees, principal contractor, you'll understand exactly what that means. General duties of persons concerned with the premises to persons other than their employees. General duties of persons in control of certain premises in relation to harmful emissions into the atmosphere. General duties of manufacturers, etc., as regards articles and substances for use at work. 7 is the general duties of employees whilst at work. And 8, duty not to interfere or misuse things that are provided pursuant to certain provision, and the duty not to charge employees for things done or provided pursuant to the certain specific requirements. And that's where we get the thing not charging for PPE from. So, what does this all mean? Well, Regulation 2, General Duties of Employers, states it should be the duty of every employer to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health, safety and welfare at work of all his employees, and without prejudice to the generality of an employer's duty under the preceding subsection, the matters to which the duty extends, and in particular, provision and maintenance of plant and systems of work that are, so far as is reasonably practicable, safe and without risk to health. And arrangements for ensuring, so far as is reasonably practicable, safety and absence of risk to health in connection with the use, handling, storage and transport of articles and substances. So you can see there when the health thing comes in, talk about as far as is reasonably practicable for safety, but in the absence of risks to health. It is completely possible to remove all risks to health whilst at work. So provision of such information, instruction, training and supervision as is necessary to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health and safety at work of his employees. And so far as is reasonably practicable as regards any place of work under the employer's control, the maintenance of it in a condition that is safe and without risk to health, and the provision and maintenance of means of access to and egress from it that are safe and without such risks. The provision and maintenance of a working environment for his employees that is, so far as is reasonably practicable, without risk to health and adequate as regards to facilities and arrangements for their welfare whilst at work. So, 3 broad brush statements made in the Health and Safety at Work Act, and how are we going to achieve these? So, they apply to everyone that's at work, bus drivers, people working in supermarkets, shops, leisure centres and construction sites. So, the risks that they face and the control measures to minimise those risks will be different in each case. We need more information on how we're going to get there. There's more information that puts more meat on the bare bones of the statements in the Act. We find them in regulation. There's quite a bit of regulation around, but again, to say, none of it clashes, it all melds together. We start with the main one really, the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations, known as the Management Regulations. And they require employers to carry out such risk assessments and make arrangements to implement necessary measures, appoint competent people, and arrange for the appropriate information and training. The Workplace Health and Safety and Welfare Regulations cover a wide range of basic health, safety and welfare issues such as ventilation, heating, lighting, workstations, seating and welfare facilities. But on construction sites, these are covered under the CDM regs, which we'll see a little bit later on. Now, the Health and Safety Display Screen Equipment Regulations set out the requirements for visual display units for you use or your monitors and screens whilst at work, and the Personal Protective Equipment at Work Regulations require employees to provide appropriate protective clothing and equipment for their employees. Provision and use of work equipment regulations require that equipment provided for use at work, including machinery, is safe. The manual handling operations cover the moving of objects by hand or bodily force. Health and safety first aid regulations cover the requirements for first aid. Work at height regulations require employees to provide appropriate access equipment and safe places of work. And the health and safety information for employees regulations require employers to display a poster telling employees what they need to know about health and safety. The Employers' Liability Compulsory Insurance Act requires employers to take out insurance against accidents and ill health to their employees. The reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrence regulations require employers to notify certain occupational injuries, diseases and dangerous events. Control of noise at work regulations require employers to take action to protect employees from hearing damage. And the control of vibration at work regulations require employers to take action to protect employees from the effects of vibration on their body. The electricity at work regulations require people in control of electrical systems to ensure their safe to use and are maintained in a safe condition. And the control of substances hazardous to health regulations require employees to assess the risk. Control of substances hazardous to health regulations require employers to assess the risk from hazardous substances and take appropriate precautions. Regulations and law approved by Parliament. These are made under the Health and Safety at Work Act, which is the umbrella act covering them all, following proposals from the HSC. This applies to regulations based on EC directives as well as homegrown ones. The majority of regulations apply across all companies, such as the manual handling work regulations, which apply whenever things are moved by hand or bodily force, and the working at height regulations, which apply wherever there is a risk of falling. Some activities or substances are so inherently hazardous that they require licensing, for example explosives and certain types of asbestos removal. Certain big and complex installations or operations require safety cases, which are large-scale risk assessments subject to scrutiny by the regulator. For example, railway companies are required to provide safety cases for their operations. And in addition, specific regulations cover particular areas, for example, asbestos and lead. So, more regulation. The Chemical Hazard and Information Packaging for Supply regulations, known as CHIP, require suppliers to classify, label and package dangerous chemicals and provide safety data sheets for them. And the Construction Design and Management regulations cover safe systems of work on construction sites. This is one of the few regulations that is aimed at a particular industry. All the others we've looked at apply to everyone at work. Construction sites, by their temporary transitory nature, considered a special case, and the construction design and management regulations have been formulated particularly to address those risks. Gas safety installation and use regulations cover safe installation, maintenance and use of gas systems and appliances in both domestic and commercial premises. The control of major accident hazard regulations require those who manufacture, store or transport dangerous chemicals or explosives in certain quantities to notify the relevant authority. And dangerous substances and explosive atmosphere regulations require employers to carry out risk assessments of work activities involving dangerous substances. Quite a raft of regulation, but we now see how they start to fit in. We decided when we looked at the Health and Safety at Work Act, employers have a duty to provide safe places of work, safe systems of work. How can we do that? Well, the Management Health and Safety at Work regulations start to tell us how we can do that. And they generally make it more explicit what employers are required to do to manage health and safety under the Health and Safety at Work Act. Like the Act, they apply to every work activity. And Regulation 3 talks about the risk assessment. Every employer shall make a suitable and sufficient assessment of the risks to the health and safety of his employees to which they are exposed whilst they are at work, the risks to health and safety of persons not in his employment arising out of or in connection with the conduct by him of his undertaking. Approved codes of practice are approved by the Health and Safety Executive with the consent of the Secretary of State, and they give practical advice on how to comply with the law. And these are written in non-legalese terms, where we've looked at regulation and acts of Parliament, which are written specifically for terms of the law. Approved codes of practice start to be written in more understandable English, and they give practical advice on how to comply with the law. And if you follow the advice given, you will be doing enough to comply with the law in respect of those matters on which the code gives advice. You may also use alternative methods to those set out in the code in order to comply with the law. However, the code has a special legal status, and if you are prosecuted for breach of health and safety law and it is proved you did not follow the relevant provisions in the code, you will need to show that you have complied with the law in some other way, or a court can find you at fault. And the HSE has embarked upon a course to withdraw all approved codes of practice and replace them with targeted guidance, and guidance doesn't have the same status in law. So the Management of Health and Safety at Work Approved Code of Practice L21 has been withdrawn and is no longer available. And people looking for information on how to manage the risks in their business are referred to guidance documents such as Health and Safety Made Simple, Basics for Your Business, INDG 441, or Managing for Health and Safety, which is HSG 65. So we've got industry guidance and health and safety guidance. The further advice can be obtained from the website link you can see on the screen. So, from the overall requirement of the Health and Safety at Work Act to the actual task in hand, how do we get there? Well, if we take the example of roof work, we all know now that we start with the Health and Safety at Work Act. Employing these roofers under Regulation 2 has a duty to provide a safe place of work, access and egress to and from, safe systems of work, and information, instruction, training and supervision to allow the operatives to carry out their work safely. How's he going to achieve that? Well, the Management of Health and Safety at Work regulations, Regulation 3, requires him to assess the risks. So he looks at the job, what risks are we facing here, and how can we control them. And to get more information on working at height in particular, we look at Regulation 6, of the work height regulations, which talks about access systems and platforms to be used when working at height. To get more information again, we can go to the Managing for Health and Safety Guidance 65 and the IMDG 401 Guidance Working at Height, a brief guide. From that, there's another document, Health and Safety in Roof Work, which is HSG 33. So right from one requirement to keep people safe, come right down to practical advice on how to make that happen. So I hope that you found that of interest and informative. If you do have any questions, my phone number's on the screen now and my email address. Do contact me if you require any information on what we've spoken about today. But as I say, until we speak next time, thank you.